Welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds with your host, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Our first guest up today, Santiago Vidal Calvo, is a cities policy analyst working primarily on government accountability and transparency through Manhattan Institute's Freedom of Information law efforts. We are big fans of everything the Manhattan Institute does here on Breaking Battlegrounds. Santiago Calvo, welcome to the program.
Hey, Chuck and Sam, thank you so much for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Let me start off with two quick questions for you. First of all, you immigrated to the United States in 2021 from Venezuela. I imagine you still have family in Venezuela. Tell us what's going on the ground there that you know from family and friends.
Yeah, correct. My parents are still there, and the situation has, I would say we need to put the pieces in a puzzle that has been unfolding over the last couple of months. From Maduro's capture, the situation has gradually improved in some areas. But it's still a continuation of the same regime. So we need to evaluate the situation in two ways. The first one is, yes, there has been improvements. Like, for example, yesterday, the first American Airlines flight got to Venezuela after 7-8 years of being closed. So that's a big improvement that we have connected flights again. The embassies are opening up again. There has been opening for investment opportunities in the country, things like that. But it's still a continuation of the same regime. So we cannot just say, oh, it's gradually better or infinitely just different. It has been better over the last 3 months, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Are there discussions going on about when, for instance, elections might occur or something like that to replace the regime?
Well, I think there are two innate interests from both the United States and Venezuela. Venezuela has an interest to not run elections because that means they can continue doing whatever they want to do, either it's money laundering or corruption or any type of illegal activities. And then the United States has an incentive to run elections, but not necessarily right now, because they know that if they run elections right now and somebody else wins, that they don't have control of the military, then they can destabilize the country or anything like that. So what currently is happening is that there are two interests. They seem to be pulling into the direction that elections might happen next year, but necessarily not this year.
Okay. Well, hopefully elections happen within the year.
We want to see change there. I mean, obviously, I think that needs to happen sooner rather than later. And if Trump leaves that through the end of his term, the chance that whoever follows him will have that commitment drops significantly.
Well, I honestly think that if Trump wanted to be very effective with Venezuela, he needs to do elections before the midterms here in the United States.
I agree.
Because after the midterms, if the Democrats control the House and, maybe the Senate, if they control both houses, then that means that any type of plan with Venezuela and interactions can be just, destroyed by a war powers resolution or whatever they want to pass and block the president's activity and authority. So I think that if he really wanted to be effective, there needs to be elections in Venezuela before the midterms.
I agree. Santiago, before we get talking about your work, what you do is you focus on government accountability and transparency through the Manhattan Institute's Freedom of Information law. People hear that word a lot, freedom of information law, FOIA requests. Explain to our audience, what is that process and why that process is important? And when you go through the process, what are the hurdles you've encountered because someone does not want you to see the information?
Yeah, so to explain it to everybody, essentially what the Freedom of Information law tool, because it's really a tool, allows you to do is that as a citizen, every single person in this country has the right to access any government records. And you have access to know what the government is up to do, and like documents, meetings, schedules, everything like that is up to public record and scrutiny because the public has an interest in getting to know those records. What my money is being spent on, what the decisions that the government is taking that it's going to affect my life, all of those things. So the Freedom of Information law, that's the name of New York, and in other places, Freedom of Information Act. In California, it's California Public Records Act. It's essentially called Public Records Request across the country. So what they do is they give you a tool to access those documents. The issue is that the government has gotten very good at blocking you from getting those documents. They have created stonewalls, they have created exemptions, they have created every single type of ability for them to say, oh, you may access these records, but they may be redacted. Or you may access these records, but this one's you cannot access them because of privacy reasons. So they have gotten very good at creating a bureaucracy that has essentially expanded and that has make it impossible for the public to actually get those records. So my job is to try to find the most efficient way to get those records and to retrieve them so other people can do research.
Santiago, one of the things governments are doing in that regard that I have seen personally, and I'm wondering how you kind of approach this, is they'll try to CC their attorney on everything, right? Whether it's a county attorney, state's attorney, whatever, and then protect it as legally protected. How do you kind of get around that? Because I've seen that practice growing at an incredible pace.
Yeah, well, let me tell you one thing that we always see in New York City, at least, and in New York, is that every single time that we file a FOIA, even if it's like super small or super big, we get a privacy exemption. Oh, you cannot request records from this individual because of privacy reasons. And it gets to an impossible parameter. Like, how do you actually negotiate with an agency that the law has given them power to essentially say you cannot get these records? Like, the issue here is that they have made the laws in a way that the agency has policy decision power, and not the law has the policy decision power. So whenever you write a law like that, you have the NYPD or any other organization that we have FOIA'd and essentially say these records need to be redacted. We cannot give you this information. Why? There's no law that you cannot say. Oh, because we believe and we interpret that this law reads this way. So what they do in your specific case is that they try to find these assumptions and interpret them in the way that serves the agency. But whenever you give them a different interpretation and you file an appeal or you go to litigation on court, then they say, oh, it's up to a judge to decide. The issue here is that we're competing with a bureaucracy that has millions and millions of dollars and they have infinite resources. So if you were the public, maybe, a random person wants to FOIA something, it's going to be very unlikely that you're going to spend $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 in litigation to actually take them to court and prove them wrong. But, we at the Manhattan Institute have some more expertise and resources,
Sure.
and we're willing to do those fights. We're litigating, a couple of cases right now because of this.
So one of the pieces you recently did, want to switch to some of your recent work, talking about the World Cup. World Cup is supposed to boost the economy. The reality looks different. It's available at the Daily Wire. Biggest event comes with a $150 gut punch. I caught this story. Can you tell people what's going on there? Because this... Well, I started laughing when I saw this.
Well, and this is, besides New York doing this, is it FIFA? Is that the
FIFA?
FIFA?
Yeah. FIFA.
They have made this so expensive, they haven't even sold out the first game yet.
Yeah. Nuts.
So anyway, tell us about this new transportation fee.
Well, yeah, we're going to have the World Cup in about, I think, 45 days or 44 days. I have the counter somewhere here. But essentially, we are about to receive the largest sporting event in the world. I don't think Americans really realize what it's up to come in the next couple of months. Let me just put it in a perspective. Every single World Cup event has had around 3 million visitors, with the United States in 1994 being the largest one by far, with 3.6 million visitors. This one, we're about to receive 7 to 10 million visitors.
Oh my goodness!
It's about 2 to 3 times the amount of visitors that every single edition before has received. So this comes with a huge economic boost for the country. We have 10 million people that are going to come for tourism. They're going to shatter records of tourism. They're going to spend a lot of money. I mean, when a final for the MetLife for the World Cup costs $20,000 to $30,000 to $40,000 in an average seat, more than the Super Bowl by far.
Wait, $30,000 to $40,000 for an average seat? You're halfway up the grandstands.
So the worst of the seats that are in the third row in the last section of MetLife, they cost $20,000.
Oh my!
I'm not kidding. Yeah.
Chuck and I are huge sports fans, and we're just sitting here looking at each other, going, "Oh my God!"
Yeah. So we have people that are going to spend money. They're coming here to spend money. They have prepared 4 years for this. They went to Qatar. In Qatar, they spent billions of dollars. So they're coming here, and New Jersey's doing exactly whatever nobody should do, which is give them $150 train ticket from Penn Station to MetLife. Everybody's going to be like, I just take an Uber. An Uber costs from the same route $60. Why are you putting a train ticket for fans $150 months before the World Cup? And their whole reason is because of competence. They had years to prepare for this, and they didn't. They moved governors last year, and the previous governor didn't do much, and they threw the whole problem to this new governor. And essentially, what's going on is that they're just trying to subsidize the whole place by upcharging ridiculous amounts to tourists. No tourist is going to pay $150.
I mean, they actually came out there and tried to claim that this was just cost recovery, which, scarily enough, I almost sort of buy because of how much waste there is in that system. Do we know, what their actual per passenger cost for a trip is?
Well, currently it costs around $12.90 for every single person to go in the same route. I don't know the specifics of what actually costs to the government, but I do know that the federal government has given them $100 million grant for transportation for this exact purposes. Congress allocated $625 million for transportation for the World
Oh,
Cup. Like we gave money from the federal government to states for solving these problems. And even if they didn't, I can tell you that the New Jersey and New York region is going to benefit from $3.3 billion of the economic boosting activity from tourism in that area. It's only 1.2 million visitors that are going to visit that area specifically. So I'm sure that the 3.3 billion more than covers whatever the cost is necessary for a couple more buses and a couple more trains.
oh, without a doubt,
Yeah.
because every
Yeah.
one of those people is paying a hotel tax. They're paying the
Yeah.
sales tax and all the other stuff that goes.
Congestion price.
Yeah.
Everything.
Right.
Yeah. So is there any plan to push back in this? What's happening there? We have just about a minute left in this segment, and then we're going to be coming back with more from Santiago Calvo here in a few minutes. But is there pushback on this right now? Is FIFA stepping in?
Well, FIFA released a statement saying that they believe New Jersey is wrong, but I think New Jersey is going to get away with it. I think what we really need to be interested about is that the U.S., New Jersey is not alone in the whole process. There are 10 more host cities, so there are 11 in total.
Right.
And there are some cities that are doing it very well. And I really want to highlight Kansas City because I think Kansas City is doing it very well. They have passed legislation to make it more easy for tourists to stay there and to have a nice trip there. For example, one of the things that I'm shocked they did, but I think it's great, is that they are expanding bar hours and they're expanding restaurant hours for many businesses around the area. And they're also allowing people to carry alcohol around the games, around the hours of the game in the streets. These are things that are positive because they create good environments for people to actually go there and bring more tourism. And they're seeing it as a windfall, which is how many cities around the U.S. should see it, as a windfall.
Well,
Try to bring as much tourism here so they spend their money here and not in New Jersey or in L.A. or other places.
well, there's not a more calm person than a drunk soccer fan, though. I've learned over the years.
All right. We're going to be coming back with more from Santiago Calvo here in a few moments, folks. Follow him on X at Santi Vidal C. Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be back in just a moment. But before we do, why are you not subscribed to our podcast? Go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote, sign up, make sure you're on our Substack, get your podcast content. We have tons of extra stuff every single week. Back in just a moment. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're continuing on in just a moment with Santiago Calvo. He is a city's policy analyst working on freedom of information law efforts through the Manhattan Institute. But first, we have a word from our sponsors with Chuck.
Folks, did you know private student loan in the United States is $300 billion, and that $45 billion of that is labeled as distressed? Why Refi, a proud sponsor of our show, refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that other companies won't touch. They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. Why Refi is not a debt settlement company, and they work with each borrower individually, tailoring each loan to meet your specific financial situation. You will not be talking with some faceless call center. Why Refi can reduce your monthly payment and guarantees interest rates under 6%, ensuring affordability, financial relief, and a good night's rest. So if you want to learn more on how to get your private student loan debt monthly payment lowered, contact Y Refi at 877-400-9989. Again, that's 877-400-9989, or visit yrefy.com and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you.
Fantastic. We're continuing on now with Santiago Calvo of the Manhattan Institute. Follow him on X at Santi Vidal C. Santiago, when we went to break, we were talking about a lot of the stuff with the World Cup coming, but a lot of news that the work that you've been doing is covering Zohran Mamdani and his new administration in New York. You had a great interview with Fox News talking about his racial equity plan, a hidden moving goalposts ploy to justify massive government expansion. Tell us what's going on there, because there's a lot of news coming from his administration. None of it good. If you come from a conservative perspective of governance, what is this about?
So, Mayor Zohran Mamdani has tried to implement what I actually think a lot of Venezuela in this case, because of very similar reasons, but they are trying to implement justifications for how do you expand government and how do you actually tell people, hey, there is a crisis and we need to fix this crisis, and the only way to fix this crisis is through government. So how do you manufacture this crisis? And essentially what he has done, which I think it's very clever if you wanted to do this, has been create something called the true cost of living. So we are redefining how poverty is done. Instead of focusing on how the government redefines poverty at the federal level, which should be for a family with children around $33,000 to $34,000 for last year, I believe, we are redefining it as a true cost of living, which is how much does it cost to live and to afford New York City with very good healthcare and children and education and everything. And that number comes to around $150,000 a year. And he says that around 62% of New York City cannot afford that true cost of living. Imagine telling the richest city in the United States that two-thirds of its population cannot afford New York City, and the only solution that you say is because of race. That is essentially what Zohran Mamdani is trying to do, and he's trying to expand the government to say, now the government is going to focus on these indicators. I think it's around 400 new indicators, and he's going to connect agencies and more cooperation between agencies to get around 600 goals that he wants to try to pass forward. And the whole, the reality is that nobody in America listens to a government and says, any mayorship, 400 new indicators. Now the government is going to be more useful and efficient. Nobody believes that. So what he's essentially trying to do is how do you justify whatever he's trying to do in the next couple of years and the massive, expansion of New York City government that we're going to see, how do you justify it? And it's by saying that 2/3 of New York City cannot afford to live there.
With this program, how are they prioritizing it based on race? One of the things that this whole idea on the left of intersectionality is starting to confuse me a little bit is they're getting very granular. If you're black and LGBTQ plus, you fall into a different category than if you're black, right? So how are they defining this?
So they did it in a very, I'm going to tell you the process that they did, and you can tell me if you believe that it sounds correct or not. But they grabbed data from 2018. So first flag for me, I don't know if it's a red flag, but first flag for me, it's grabbing data from 2018. Then they estimated the data 4 years after for 2022. So they projected the data.
Oh, good.
So they essentially invented the data for 2022 by estimating it. There are some statistical analysis that, are very robust do this way, but why just not grab the 2022 data? You have it available.
Right.
They're grabbing the ACS. So they grabbed this data and they estimated it. And then they ran their research. And their research showed that it's more difficult for Hispanic, Asian, and Black families to live in New York City than to white families. The issue here, and that's how they're doing their indicators and their goals and everything, it's based on those understandings. It's that they have found that Latinos and Hispanics and Blacks and Asians have it more difficult to afford New York City than whites, mainly.
Now,
So
by that, I want to clarify, this is kind of an oddball question maybe, but by that, do they mean they're earning less money, or do they mean they need to earn more money to have equality?
That's a great question. I think both. I think that the fact that, and this is one of my issues with the whole proposal, it's that they connected it through race, but they didn't connect it through neighborhoods. And it's quite interesting to me because for me, the big question about affordability is not whether you are white or black or Asian or Hispanic. It's whether if you are having a really hard time affording a penthouse in Tribeca,
Right.
that doesn't affect race. That affects your ability to pay there. Or if you're having a very hard time affording a studio in the Bronx, that's also not race. That's how much you're earning to live in that place.
Right.
So that's my big point with all of this planning. Is that I feel like it's diagnosing the disease as something very different, and it's not going to diagnosing the symptoms, but it's not going to the actual problems. And the problems are the lack of housing. Problems are the lack of the massive red tape that you have to open new businesses, the high taxes in the city. All of these things make the place more unaffordable. So of course it's going to be compounded with race, because if you have all of these underlying diseases, then the product at the end is going to come biased. It's going to come out bad. And if you don't fix the things that the city needs, which mainly it's just lack of housing, the possibility to build more and to have more places to rent and to eliminate the rent freeze, which is just a ridiculous idea that you want to put this forward. If you actually do all the things, then at the end, whatever study you're going to say, whatever study you run in 5 to 10 years from now, if you actually do all of those things, it's going to say, oh, everybody can afford New York City. It's not going to be separated by race anymore. It's just going to be everybody can afford New York City.
If you got rid of the rent freeze, correct me if I'm wrong, if you got rid of the rent freeze, you would put tens of thousands of units on the market overnight.
Well, Adam Drescher wrote a piece for our Substack. He's from New York, and says there's currently 50,000 plus homes that people can't get into because they don't make enough money
to repair them, to fix them back up.
So it's not. So they just said empty.
Yeah, this is crazy stuff. Santiago Calvo, tell people how they stay in touch with you and your work.
Well, they can go and see my pieces in City Journal. I try to be active in City Journal at the Manhattan Institute. If not in City Journal, I publish almost every week on a different outlet. You can follow me on X in Santi Vidal C, and you can follow me on those places.
Fantastic. Santiago Calvo, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you being a part of our program. Folks, stay tuned. We have more great interviews coming up. And if you haven't already, again, go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote and sign up for that extra content on our Substack and podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds with yours, Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. Today, for our little short 6-minute segment, we have a special feature that normally is found in the podcast. But if you're not subscribed to the podcast, one, do that. Go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote. But two, you're missing this incredible new content, Bee's Corner. Welcome, Bee.
Hello. How are we doing?
Good. So what's going on in the world?
Yeah, what murder and mayhem do we have?
Worth your 6 minutes today.
So this is an older one, but it had a lot of impact and a lot of laws that are in place today that help situations like this. This happened on July 27th, 1981. A 6-year-old named Adam Walsh. I don't know if that name sounds familiar to you guys. He went shopping with his mom at Sears, and he went off to the toy section while she was in the furniture section, and he disappeared. And it later was found out that a security guard who was young kicked out a group of teenagers and Adam, who was with the group, but not with them.
How old was he again?
6.
Okay.
And so he was kicked out of an exit that he did not know and didn't come through.
Right.
So it was a new whereabouts, and he was missing. So the mom was looking everywhere. And after 2 hours, they contacted police. They released flyers. So much media was released to try to find this kid. And then 2 weeks later, his head was found in a canal.
Oh.
Where was this at?
Florida, Hollywood, Florida.
I sort of remember this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the dad, John Walsh, John Walsh. Yep, there it is. So he made America's Most Wanted. And he made that, but also implemented a lot of laws that just help prevent police negligence in situations like this.
Well, and that is the origin of the Amber Alert, right? So eventually that actually led to the creation of the Amber Alert and the alert system that we have today. It also changed store policy. I kind of remember this now, and I forgot I forgot that his father was.
Did they ever sue Sears?
I'm sure they must have.
I'm going to Google it while we're talking about it.
And so then, the really big part of this case, too, that's really interesting is that it tied to a couple different serial killers. At one point, they were questioning Dahmer because this took over a decade, 27 years to solve. And it was a push and pull with so many different suspects. They had an initial suspect of this gentleman who's 25 years old that was living with them a week before and moved out the week before. And I guess he was close with Adam, the kid, but there's issues. So he was heavily interviewed, and they did the lie test on him, but he passed it and was all good. But then Dahmer was linked to it because of his timeline and where he was at and being in Miami, but it didn't add up.
So it was so the actual person was a serial killer, Otis tool.
Yep, and he confessed to it, but wasn't actually alive when they considered him.
Well, what's amazing about that, they did sue Sears Roebuck, but
Good.
it was the defense tactics. Lawyers for Sears and the mall allegedly employed harsh tactics, including questioning Reeve Walsh's whereabouts and suggesting the child ran away. And John Walsh called it disgusting maneuvers. They ended up dropping the lawsuit because I guess the defense got so
nasty.
harsh.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's when he opened and created National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
It kind of throws. You think of the 70s and 80s, and a Sears Roebuck as a wholesome thing.
Yeah. Well, the story's really dated by just having Sears mentioned in it.
Oh, right.
That too.
Yeah.
I mean, you both are not old enough. Sam and I are old enough when you get those Sears catalogs.
Oh my God, that was great. That catalog was
they were
fantastic.
thick, and you get them around Christmas.
It had everything.
Yeah, I mean,
twice
everything.
a year they put out the Sears catalog, summer and winter.
And they were like this thick, and you get them right before Christmas. And they had all the
released those,
toys,
so you
and
don't have to
oh
go.
my goodness.
Oh no, yeah, they mailed them
Kids
to
got
you.
scared.
Yeah, they'd send them to you. You get it in the mail. You'd had no internet, so that was the only way to see all these new products and things.
And people forget Sears sold everything. They sold appliances.
You could buy a car out of that magazine.
Yeah, no. Sears was a big deal.
Yeah.
It's like old time Amazon.
America's not been as good since Sears left us.
Well, and Sears was like when people think now of Walmart or Target or those when they first opened and people are wandering around oh my God, there's everything here. That was Sears in the 70s and 80s. Going to Sears was a thing. It was a trip. It was worthwhile. And you got a hot dog at the counter. They had those too.
Well, what a very sad story.
Yeah.
You know, I met John Walsh late 90s. He was a very, very nice man. But I guess doing that show was therapeutic for him.
I imagine it would be.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Actually,
Wow.
Yeah. Actually, the photo I have him is really good. I look good.
I had. We all look good when we're that young, Chuck. Jeez.
Black suit, nice purple tie.
I did not know
looking
that
good.
he was tied to that case. That's an
I
interesting
didn't
thing.
either. I didn't either.
Yeah,
So thank you for doing that.
started
That's
it all.
fantastic.
Stay tuned, folks. Our next guest up will be Alex Welz. You don't want to miss this one. He is an editor for the Washington Free Beacon. We're talking about lots of good stuff, but particularly the Middle East, Iran, Israel, and Lebanon. Coming up.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Joining us now is Alex Welz, an editor at the Washington Free Beacon and a junior fellow at the Middle East Forum. His focus is on Iran, Israel, and especially Lebanon, among other regional dynamics from the Middle East. Alex Welz, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Alex, so there's currently a ceasefire in Lebanon, okay? And there's talk of potential peace between Lebanon and Israel. Can you tell us a little update on that? Are you optimistic about it? And something that hopefully you've thought about is, what is the plan by both sides to disarm Hezbollah?
This is long in the making, dating from the last November ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Israel has continued to strike strategic Hezbollah strongholds in the south, and in hopes of softening the organization, the political entity, the military outfit that is all wrapped in one in Hezbollah. The Lebanese government has made it clear that they wish to be the monopoly holders of arms in the country. This is dating back from the Lebanese Civil War, the Taif Agreement, where the militias that were spawned during that civil war were supposed to disarm. The infamous UN Resolution 1701 from 2006 said that Hezbollah had to move north of the Litani River. They had to disarm. None of that has come to fruition. And so for as long as Hezbollah is active and present in the south, now right now, Israel occupies about 10% of southern Lebanon, and they're working to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure there. But for as long as Hezbollah exists as a powerful and potent entity, especially among the Lebanese Shia, I think they're here to stay, unfortunately.
That's depressing.
Well, it is, but I'm wondering what long term do you see being the result of this shift? Because this is a pretty dramatic shift for the Lebanese government to start actively being able to work with Israel to oppose Hezbollah.
And there are large segments of the Lebanese population that is open to working with Israel. There are large segments that are not, and that does not mean that they're aligned with Hezbollah. Israel and Lebanon have long been at odds from the inception of the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. However, I still think, and same with Syria, within the next half a decade, I think there's a decent shot that both Syria and Lebanon, the state of Lebanon, enters into an Abraham Accords type of agreement with Israel for its perks to America. I mean, remember, the Lebanese army is almost entirely, not almost entirely, but substantially subsidized by the U.S. military. So Lebanon has every interest to be more closely affiliated with the U.S., certainly with the dynamics and the aftermath of Iran and their regional standing. They like to stay as far away as they can and ally themselves to the U.S., to Israel, which now stands pretty securely as the lone regional hegemon in the Middle East. So it's in Lebanon's interest, but they have to get through Hezbollah first. And for as long as Iran exists, it's not a problem really with what Iran does, what Hezbollah does. The problem is with who they are intrinsically, their raison d'etre. Okay. So for as long as they're in existence, they will stand opposed to any framework of regional peace.
So you said something that made Sam and I's jaws drop. You said the United States government subsidizes substantially Lebanon's army. How long has that been going? Does that ebb and flow with administration? I just looked it up. It's $230 million security aid package. Explain to us how we got there on that. I had no clue about this, and definitely my audience doesn't have a clue about it.
Glad, but I mean, American aid to the state, again, the state of Lebanon is very distinct from Hezbollah. And in many ways opposed, even though the two get conflated since the times of the Lebanese Civil War, which ranged from 1975 to 1990, has played a role, especially in the 80s under Christian ally-dominated Lebanese governments, has played a role in the security of Lebanon. Obviously, the Marines were there. Sure. Reagan brought them in. Reagan pulled them out. But this has been a long-standing agreement the U.S. has had with Lebanon. Qatar, other Gulf allies, Saudi Arabia also contributes to funding of the Lebanese military. I mean, listen, Hezbollah is deemed a terrorist organization by countries in the Gulf as well. This spans religion. It spans a sort of pan-Islamic alliance against Hezbollah. I mean, Hezbollah has been known to commit terror attacks in the Gulf, in Kuwait, certainly during the Iran-Iraq War and beyond. So this is a multi-front battle.
That's incredible.
Where, in terms of, you have another piece out I want to move on to here, to salvage the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, work within its limits. What do you mean? I
don't believe I wrote that.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was a piece that was attached to this from the crisis group, Middle East, North Africa. But if that's not your piece, I move on. I believe you had another one on Hezbollah's human shield strategy. Can you tell us how I assume that's fairly similar to what we're seeing throughout other parts of the Middle East, but what are they doing exactly in that regard?
Yeah, so that's also not my piece, but I'm happy to explain. It sounds like a great one. I think you all should check it out. But I can explain maybe what I think the author is getting at there. Hezbollah has an essential monopoly over everything you can imagine. It's a proto-government in southern Lebanon. Southern Lebanon is dominated by Shia Muslims. Hezbollah is a Shia group. Hezbollah has financial arms. They have essentially banks that only the Shia use. They have aid networks that only the Shia use. When they get into fights with Israel, it is Hezbollah-aligned charities that come to the aid of the Shia Lebanese. So even there are non-radical elements to the popularity of Hezbollah in Lebanon. They really act both within the state and beyond it. So it really serves as a replacement of the state. But of course, it puts civilians on the front lines against Israeli retaliations.
Okay, so let's talk about Iran. Washington Post came out with a poll today. 2 in 10 Americans think it's going well. 4 in 10 think it's going bad. And 4 out of 10 don't know. What do you think the administration's not doing correctly to communicate what they are achieving in Iran? What do they need to do?
That's a good question. I think, like most things, it comes down to a messaging problem. I know that gets overused a lot, but look, it's important to be honest about these things and to admit that the regime was not as fragile as some of the more avid proponents of intervention thought it would be. It did not turn out to be Venezuela, and they learned the hard way. However, that doesn't detract from the enormous losses that we've incurred on Iran. I mean, the ballistic missile capacity is diminished. The naval capability is next to nothing from the last time I checked. The blockade is in full force. It's depriving Iran of oil revenues. So there's a lot of good. I mean, this looks bad, but a lot of good is being done here. It's softening some of the more radical elements of the region, and places like the UAE, the Emirates, the Emiratis came out and said, we're going to leave OPEC. So even this sort of post-war architecture of the Middle East is going in a good direction, in my opinion. And also, I want your audience to think about this, is that the latest round of deadly protests we saw, and I've seen estimates as high as 40,000 people were killed. That might be on the high end. But that was not a Masa Amini 2022 woman life freedom, rise up against the Islamic regime type of protest. These were rank and file Iranians, water access, and very pragmatic concerns. So if the U.S. continues to strangle the Iranian economy, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the regime does fold at some point.
Okay, so that brings me a question here. I think Donald Trump is doing some things that will make America more secure and prosperous 5, 10, 20 years from now that people cannot grasp right now, okay? And if you agree with that or disagree, tell our audience your feelings is what he is doing in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords, Lebanon, Iran, the UAE breaking off from OPEC. How does that make America stronger and more secure in 5 or 10 years? I don't think people see the grand strategy here.
So I want you guys to think about how the Middle East looked on October 6th of 2023, one day before the Hamas massacre. Hamas is decimated. It's just a criminal entity running around in
limited reach outside of their direct control area.
There's no missiles going into Israel anymore from the Gaza Strip. I mean, they've been completely obliterated in that sense, not organizationally, but certainly tactically. Hezbollah in Lebanon has been degraded tremendously. I mean, epitomized by the famous pager operation that we saw, right? The Assad regime in Syria fell basically overnight. That lost a true Russian ally, a Chinese ally. I mean, in many regards, like I said, I think it's also, we should be hopeful that the Syrians come to the Abraham Accords in the next half decade here. And then the Houthis have been largely sidelined. We haven't heard anything from the Houthis since the prime days of the October 7th retaliation. And then Iran is now strategically degraded. It's going to harm China's. I mean, there's a report from the Journal, I think, this morning that said Iran is now looking to export oil to China via rail. Desperate measure. And then with the UAE leaving, I think that signals more of a strain in UAE-Saudi ties. But still, it's going to dilute the price of oil. It's going to have a downward effect, which is going to harm Iran and their recovery here. So there's a lot going on. I mean, we're talking about Saudi Arabia and Israel potentially normalizing. A generation ago, 20 years ago, that would be, unfathomable. So this is a generational effort, and we have to move the Overton window when it comes to allyship in the Middle East and crafting these new ally frameworks. But it's coming along slowly but surely. I really believe that.
Alex, one of the things that I've sort of raged at over the years is that the foreign policy establishment here in the United States has been stuck on ideas that just never worked. I mean, their view of how the Middle East, we should engage with it and progress, it just never went anywhere. Now Trump has come in, he's totally changed the paradigm by basically doing a lot of the things they just said you can't do all that. Trump went out and did it. It's been successful. Has he started to get those folks to rethink and reconsider some of their dogma?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. I don't live in those systems, in those spaces as much, but I can't say, I mean, take a guy like Jared Kushner, who has an incredible background in business, and he got thrust into this role, and Trump won even, or rather the first Trump administration. I mean, did amazing things. He crafted the Abraham Accords, he molded it into what it is. And Trump has a very transactional way, which you kind of have to when it comes to signing on the dotted line. I mean, Trump is challenging the status quo in a lot of ways, even domestic politics. I mean, people like Jon Stewart. I mean, the Democrats are looking for some sort of outsider. Right. Stephen A. Smith. I mean, think of the conversations that were provoking that, again, 10 years ago. I'm not sure without the advent of Trump, we would even be entertaining.
No, I would absolutely agree.
John, excuse me, Alex, we have 2 minutes left here in the segment. I'd like you to stay on a little bit extra for our podcast segment, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Great. I would love to see you, because you're so knowledgeable on this issue, write something in the Washington Free Beacon about what is happening in the Middle East and what it means for the United States long term. Because I think what is missing, and the press is not providing this context, is what is happening is truly revolutionary into how the United States spends its national security resources, its diplomatic resources. If things change in Syria, if you really have a ceasefire withstand in Lebanon, if Iran goes forward and becomes more of a less of a threat to its neighbors, I don't think people understand what this means, because we live so much in this social media culture. I want it now. Does that make sense?
Of course. And a lot of this is colored through progressive lenses too, where progressives tend to think of radicals as simply moderates who had a rough childhood, and they don't understand that there are actual really bad guys out there who want to do real harm to a lot of people. And like I said, a lot of this may look bad, but it's doing good to digest, and it's not very palatable to a lay person. But I do think you can see some of the fruits being reaped here.
Absolutely. Alex Welz, we appreciate you joining us. You're sticking around for the podcast. So, folks, if you're not downloading that, go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote. Sign up right now for that. You can follow Alex on X at WellsAlex, and obviously at the Washington Free Beacon. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back on the air next week.
Hi, kids. Remember your dreams? All the future plans you made? Has private student loan debt destroyed those dreams? It doesn't have to. Y-Refi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can reduce your payment, you can get your life back, and they don't even care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call Y-Refi today. Let's go!
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We're continuing on now with Alex Welz, editor at the Washington Free Beacon and a junior fellow at the Middle East Forum. You can follow him on X at WellsAlex.
So, Alex, I have two questions for you. The first one is this. Sam and I have talked about this a lot, and we've talked with other radio show hosts. The United States can view victory in Iran two ways. One, if we actually make them less of a threat to their fellow Middle East countries and we disable their nuclear
in the
arms.
world.
In the world, okay?
Yeah.
So that's a win for the United States. But for the Iranian people, the true win is regime change. And my question is this. What is it about this administration that you think they did not understand that a bunch of mullahs and religious extremists were not going to be easy to prod from their power seats? I don't understand why people thought they would just collapse like that.
Well, I think for as amazing as the Venezuela operation was and extraditing Maduro, it was probably a curse as well, because it was, there will be movies made about that operation. It was unthinkable.
Right.
What the U.S. Armed Forces did there. So I'm sure that colored a lot of Trump's decision-making with this. But also, again, this was on the heels of massive, massive unrest in Iran, tens of thousands killed by their own government. We've seen this before, but it just seemed like we were on the cusp, like we were on the breaking point. And for as much as, Trump's domestic agenda has been spoiled or stopped by Democrats and others. I think this is his outlet, and this is where he thinks his legacy is going to be made in
Yes.
foreign policy. And I think that goes into his decision making a lot. I really do.
What if you being an expert on this and you writing for a career, what do you think is his legacy if he goes and finishes Iran? They have free elections in Venezuela. I think they're in Cuba by fall. Plus, you have his focus on critical minerals. You have Lebanon. What do you think his legacy will be in 10, 20 years for an objective observer?
Well, I think it stands as an ultimate condemnation of the status quo foreign policy establishment, this sort of empty proceduralism that we've seen dominate global affairs. And it turns out that the U.S. can just go do stuff. And we don't need these intricate treaties and things of that nature. It turns out that we are the unilateral global superpower, the most extreme fighting force that the world has ever produced, and we can go achieve our objectives. And we don't need to ask for permission, and we don't need to commission large-scale UN committees to talk about things. If something's in our interest, and if it serves the interests of our allies, we can just do it. And I think that unconventionality that Trump brought to the table just opened the floodgates of that. I really do.
Do you think I keep having this thought in my mind that what happened in Iran with the protests breaking out, sometimes, as a world leader, Trump and others, you just have to respond to events, right? But realistically, boy, it would have been nice to have that break out about a year later when some of the field was cleared from the other things he's doing right now.
Yeah.
Alex, one of the things you said earlier that I wanted to get back to was talking about Jared Kushner's role, being a business person, being someone familiar with the give and take of trade and international trade. Does the U.S. not understand, or do we need to dive further into embracing the historical mercantile culture of the Middle East? In other words, there's multiple identities in any culture. If we're going to be trying to push out Islamism, should we be trying to rebuild the connection with the trading cultures of the Middle East?
Yeah, I think it's one thread to pull on. I mean, Lebanon, for instance, listen, I'm ethnically Lebanese, but if you ask a lot of Lebanese people, they'll say we aren't Arab, we're Phoenician, and they dig their heels into this, just like you were saying, this sort of ancient Mediterranean sort of trading ground that all different types of people came across, and they did. It was very cosmopolitan in certain senses. But what you're dealing with in the Middle East it is a series of primordial identities. I mean, a lot of people in the Middle East don't see themselves as Iraqis first. They see themselves as Sunni or Shia or Arab or Kurdish or some sort of prevailing identity that comes before the nation state itself. A lot of these countries, these sovereign states, are fairly new and oftentimes Western inventions. And so it's the identities that you have to grapple with. And what Kushner and others, I think, see is, and it's an old conservative idiom, but there really are no such things as solutions, certainly in the Middle East. There are only trade-offs. And the further, Americans are very engineer-like. We see a problem, we want to fix it.
Right.
But there, oftentimes that premonition can cause you more harm than good, just constantly searching for a solution when a lot of times there isn't one, and you just have to find the best way around it.
You made a very interesting point. They don't, for example, in Iraq, they don't see themselves as Iraqis. They see themselves as Sunnis or Shiites and so forth.
A lot of them do. I mean, some.
But some do. But so how does that play in when these good folks come over to the United States? Is there a possibility they ever can be truly assimilated in our country when their first loyalty is to being a Shiite?
I think their kids can.
You see what I'm saying? How if you're United States and you're looking at immigration reforming it, how do you assimilate them when they always view that as their first loyalty?
Yeah, I mean, I would be careful not to overstate that. I think there's a lot of Catholics, and certainly in the 60s and in the 20th century, this was a claim that a lot of Catholics, especially because there's Vatican City as a sovereign country, had to grapple with as well. How could you possibly be loyal to the U.S. if you had? So I think we all have our sense of primordial identities as Christians, as religious people, as fathers. You know, I'm a father maybe before I'm a father before I'm an American. I'm this before. So I get what you're saying in practice, and I think there's probably some utility to scrutinizing heavier when it comes to that and radicalism and things of that nature. I'm not too much concerned with
Okay.
the religious or other social identities prevailing.
Now, you got your master's in Israel, correct?
Yes.
I'm sure you have many friends and contacts in Israel. How do they view the war in Iran going right now, for those you're close to or former colleagues and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, the Israelis are largely thrilled. They would have loved, just like we would have, to seen the culmination of our fight here in the fall of the Islamic Republic. That's not happening anytime soon, it appears. But listen, the Israelis are very much like our pit bull that we can take in a really rough neighborhood, and we have the leash on, and they are the first line here. We can kind of let the pit bull go, take out who we need them to take out, and whistle them right back. So the Israelis are wonderful allies. They largely have always been, I don't see any danger in that.
Well, and that's an interesting description, you know, them as our pit bull, because so much of the criticism right now of Trump is that he's being led around by the nose by Netanyahu. But the reality is that's kind of the reverse, right? I mean, the United States and Donald Trump are still the controlling force in that relationship.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a silly talking point. But of course, and this is not to say that it's not in Israel's interest for us to intervene in Iran.
Sure.
It's the same with a bunch of allies. I mean, South Korea would love for us to do a lot of things. You know, like the Gulf would love for us to do. This is not unique to Israel. Israel plays an outsized role in American politics because of large Jewish population we have here, because of our Judeo-Christian heritage, because of a bunch of other things. And they've also just turned out to be one heck of a military force, certainly for their size. And so, of course, those concerns always need to be balanced against each other. But all in all, I mean, when you look at the balance sheet, I think it's a wonderful relationship that has bore a lot of fruit.
So you studied in Israel. You obviously very familiar with the culture there. Does Israel need to really start, frankly, putting some money into international PR to explain and show people who they are? Because right now, it seems like they're being boxed into a corner by this sort of red-green alliance.
Yeah, they are, but it's not just a red green. It's. I mean, the Europeans, I mean, have essentially abdicated from their role in history. I mean, they've become fairly useless at this point when it comes to large-scale global affairs. So if you talk to Israelis, they're not worried about this. I mean, for as much of we're told that Netanyahu and others are becoming pariahs, I mean, it's true in certain international bodies. The UN is a sort of farce. I mean, Iran used to, Sudan, barbaric regimes sit on UN human rights commissions. I mean, it's a joke. Largely, a lot of these things are a joke. So the Israelis I've talked to are not concerned. And in fact, there's a growing movement in Israel to ward off all U.S. aid, especially military aid, because the economy is strong enough, and they don't want to have to listen to progressives browbeat them into using certain American tech in certain ways. They have great domestic defense manufacturers, and they would like the freedom to use it how they see fit. Now, there's a level of influence that goes with them using Raytheon stuff, right? That we can exert over them, which is great. But this is going to be a raging debate, and ironically, the hard left and proponent or large scale Israeli proponents are advocating for the same position, which is let's cut off American aid to Israel. It's a very interesting debate.
Well, and at this time in particular, that would actually, not the cutting off of aid, obviously, but Israel plays a really critical role in U.S. defense production capacity right now because a lot of the critical technologies that we're incorporating are coming from them.
And the technologies that they're purchasing is heavily staffed and employed by American workers.
Yeah, it's amazing. Alex, last question here, and then we'll let you go. We appreciate your time today. Where do you think we are come November 2026 in Iran? What's your guess?
Oh, goodness, November 2026 in Iran. You know what? This is the boring route. I think you're going to see a lot of what you're going to see in the next 3 or 4 weeks. I think it's going to look the same. I think it's going to be a heavily degraded economy, a heavily degraded military infrastructure. The leadership is going to be underground still. I mean, we have not seen Moshtaba Khamenei emerge. He's allegedly very wounded. But it's like the Wizard of Oz. We were just talking about it in the office. He releases statements every now and then. We don't know if he's dead, if he's alive, but why would you show your face? I mean, the Israelis, he's high on the Israelis list.
Yeah, every time they pop up, they get their head cut off.
Right. I mean, I don't know how long you can survive politically in that sort of political architecture like that. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's more durable than we think, but obviously the IRGC, the elite Iranian military body, is calling the shots there. And for a while, Khamenei was Ali Khamenei, the former and deceased former supreme leader. This is his son, the new supreme leader. And there was a lot of controversy in the years before when he was old and sick of who's going to replace him. And people were saying his son, well, he can't be his son. The whole makes it look like a monarchy. And so I don't, I think there could be a political upheaval and we could see people pour out onto the streets. But listen, it's also just a beat down people. Same with Syria. I mean, the country has just been through hell and back. And so it's hard to muster up the courage, let alone the political will, to keep marching every few months and to get slaughtered. I mean, it's a tough spot. So I see the regime surviving for the time being, but in a crippled sense. It'll be on crutches.
Thank you so much, Alex Welz. Really appreciate you being on the program with us today, folks. Follow him on X at Welz Alex, also at the Washington Free Beacon. And be sure you're going to breakingbattlegrounds.vote. Sign up for the Substack. We've got a ton of extra content coming there here in the near future. For Chuck, I'm Sam. For all of our crew, thank you so much for joining us. We're back next week.